Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku met Gang Orca first. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The reality of the world is not simply that men are not created equal. It is that the world is a vast, crushing ocean, and some people are born with gills, while others are born with stones tied to their ankles. Izuku Midoriya learned this when he was 4 years old. He learned that the surface was a privilege, not a right. By the time he was 14, the sensation of drowning had become so familiar that he had stopped flailing. He just held his breath, kept his eyes open, and waited for the pressure to finally crush him completely. Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your future, the teacher said, his voice droning with the practiced apathy of a man who had given this speech 100 times. I would pass out these career aptitude forms, but... He paused, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He snatched a stack of papers from his desk and threw them into the air. I assume you all want to be heroes. The classroom exploded. It was a cacophony of cheers and the distinct, varied sounds of quirks activating. Hands turned to stone, eyes elongated, small fires flickered on fingertips. It was a display of individuality, a celebration of power. Izuku sat perfectly still. He kept his head down, his hands gripping the hem of his uniform trousers so tightly his knuckles turned white. Don't look up. If you don't look up, they won't see you. If they don't see you, you don't exist. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, waving a hand to settle them down. But remember, using your powers in school is against the rules. Hey, teach! The voice cut through the noise like a jagged knife. Katsuki Bakugo leaned back in his chair, feet propped up on his desk, a look of utter disdain plastered across his sharp features. Don't lump me in with these extras, Bakugo scoffed. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some busted D-lister. I'm the real deal. I'm going for the top. The class erupted in angry murmurs, but Bakugo ignored them, grinning like a shark sensing blood. I've got perfect grades. I'm the only one here with the stuff to make it to UA High. Oh, that's right, the teacher mused, looking at his clipboard. Bakugo, you're aiming for UA. The murmurs turned into gasps of awe. UA was the fortress, the summit, the holy land of heroism. It was impossible for most, but for Bakugo, it felt inevitable, and... The teacher's eyes slid down the list, and a cruel silence descended upon the room. Midoriya, you put down UA as well, didn't you? The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was a vacuum. It was the sudden drop in air pressure before a storm. Izuku flinched. He felt the eyes of every student in the room bore into the back of his neck. Then, the laughter started. It wasn't a ripple, it was a tidal wave. Midoriya? No way. You can't get into the hero course just by studying. He's quirkless. What's he gonna do, annoy the villains to death? They got rid of that rule. Izuku stood up, his voice trembling, trying to defend a dream that felt more fragile by the second. There's no actual precedent. Boom! An explosion rocked his desk, sending him flying backward onto the floor. The smell of burnt wood and nitroglycerin filled his nose. Izuku looked up, scrambling backward, to see Bakugo standing over him. Smoke curled from the blonde's palms. Forget the crappy quirks these extras have, Bakugo snarled, his voice low and dangerous. You're worse than them, Deku. You're nothing. You're a pebble on the side of the road, and you think you can stand in the same ring as me? No! Wait, Kaken, it's not like I'm trying to compete with you. Izuku stammered, holding his hands up in surrender, scooting back until his back hit the chalkboard. It's been my dream since I was little. And well, I won't know unless I try. Try? Bakugo loomed over him, his shadow stretching long and dark. Try what? Taking the entrance exam? You're going to die. You have no power. What can a quirkless loser actually do? Izuku had no answer. He never did. The rest of the day passed in a haze. The final bell rang, signaling freedom, but for Izuku, it just meant the transition from one cage to another. He packed his bag slowly, checking his phone. Hero news, empty lady debut. Gigantification quirk causes massive property damage, but popularity soars. He swiped the screen, trying to find solace in the analysis, in the data. He pulled out his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. This was his anchor. As long as he was writing, as long as he was thinking, he was still part of this world. We're not done talking, Deku. The notebook was snatched from his hands. Izuku looked up to see Bakugo holding the book, his two lackeys flanking him like remora fish trailing a shark. Please, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice small. Give it back. Hero Analysis? Bakugo read the cover, snorting. For the future? You really are delusional. Clap. Bakugo pressed the notebook between his palms. A sharp explosion muffled the sound of the paper tearing. When he pulled his hands away, the notebook was charred, smoking, and ruined. Ah! Izuku cried out, reaching for it. Bakugo didn't hand it back. He tossed it casually out the open window. Izuku watched in horror as his hard work, his months of observation, fluttered down toward the koi pond below. Most top-tier heroes have stories about their school days, Bakugo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. I want mine to be perfect. The only student from this garbage dump to make it to UA. That's my legacy. So, don't apply, Deku. Bakugo placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. It was hot, stinging through the fabric of his uniform. Don't make me kill you. He turned to leave, his lackeys laughing as they followed. But at the door, Bakugo stopped. He glanced back, his red eyes narrowing with a dark, cruel inspiration. You know, if you want to be a hero that badly, there might be another way. Izuku looked up, hope and dread warring in his chest. Pray that you'll be born with a quirk in the next life, Bakugo sneered, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. The door slid shut. Izuku stood alone in the darkening classroom. His hands shook. His breath hitched in his throat. Idiot, Izuku thought, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to Bakugo or himself. If I actually did that, that would be instigation of suicide. You'd never get into UA then. He tried to summon anger. He tried to summon indignation. But all he felt was the familiar, cold pressure of the deep water, filling his lungs, dragging him down. He retrieved his notebook from the koi pond. The fish were nibbling at the burned edges. Stupid fish, he muttered, shaking the water off the sodden pages. That's not food. Normally Izuku would walk home through the underpass. It was the quickest route. But today, the thought of the tunnel, dark, enclosed, echoing, felt unbearable. He couldn't go home yet either. If he went home now, his mother would see his face. She would see the red eyes, the slump in his shoulders. She would ask what was wrong, and when he didn't answer, she would look at him with those big, tearful eyes and say, I'm sorry, Izuku. I'm so sorry. He didn't want pity. He was drowning in pity. Izuku turned away from the route to the apartments, and started walking south. Toward the industrial district. Toward the sea. Muzidafu was a coastal city. The air changed as he walked, the exhaust fumes of the city giving way to the brine of the ocean. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with clouds. He ended up at the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, but he didn't stop at the mountain of trash that covered the sand. He skirted the edge of the junkyard, moving toward the active docks near the Oki Mariner Public Aquarium. The area was industrial, a maze of shipping containers, cranes, and wet concrete. It was loud here, but it was an impersonal noise. The screech of metal, the horn of tugboats, the crash of waves against the seawall. It was a noise that didn't judge him. Izuku walked to the edge of a pier, sitting on a rusted bollard. He opened his soggy notebook. The ink was running, words bleeding into illegible stains. All Might, the page read, the drawing of the hero warped by the water. Symbol of peace. It doesn't matter, Izuku whispered to the waves. It doesn't matter how much I analyze. It doesn't matter how hard I study. He looked at his hands. They were plain. Unremarkable. No explosions. No strength. Take a swan dive, he repeated. The words tasted like bile. That's a dangerous place to sit, kid. The voice was deep. It resonated in Izuku's chest, like the hum of a large engine or the call of a whale. It wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable weight. Izuku jumped, nearly slipping off the bollard. He scrambled to his feet, clutching his ruined notebook to his chest. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass, He froze. Standing a few meters away was a mountain of a man. He had to be over 2 meters tall. He wore a heavy, high-collared white trench coat that looked expensive but stained with salt spray. A matching fedora shadowed his face, but it couldn't hide his features, or rather, his lack of human features. His head was encased in smooth, black and white flesh. His eyes were white rings, staring with an intensity that felt predatory. His mouth, if you could call it that, was a rigid jawline of terrifying aesthetic. It was Kugo Sakamata, the Orca hero. Gang Orca, the number 10 hero. Izuku's brain short-circuited. Gigi Gang Orca. Sir. The Oki Mariner Agency is based near here, right? I saw on the forums that you were doing a shoreline patrol sweep last Tuesday, but I didn't think you'd be inspecting the commercial docks personally. The massive hero stared at him. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and heavy. Then, Gang Orca tilted his head. You mutter, Orca stated. It wasn't a question. It was an observation of a flaw. Sorry. Izuku slapped a hand over his mouth. It's a bad habit. I analyze heroes. It's a hobby. Gang Orca stepped closer. His movement was surprisingly fluid for someone of his size. He moved like water flowing around an obstacle. He looked down at the notebook in Izuku's hand. That book. It is wet. Oh. Yeah. Izuku looked down, shame heating his cheeks. It fell in a pond. And yet you are trying to write in it, Orca noted. Why? Because it's all I have, Izuku admitted, his voice barely audible over the crashing waves. If I stop writing, then I'm just... He trailed off. Just what? Orca pressed. His voice was harsh. Useless? Izuku flinched. The words struck too close to home. You have the posture of a victim, Gang Orca said, crossing his arms. The leather of his coat creaked. Shoulders hunched. Head down. Eyes darting. You look like prey waiting to be eaten. Is that what you are, boy? Chum? I want to be a hero, Izuku blurted out. The words felt ridiculous as soon as they left his mouth in the presence of the number 10. Gang Orca didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just stared, his white eyes narrowing. A hero, Orca repeated. With that spine? With that trembling voice? The ocean does not care for your intentions, boy. It cares only for your strength. If you cannot swim, you sink. Looking at you, I see a stone. It was harsh. It was brutal. It was exactly what Izuku expected. I know, Izuku whispered, tears pricking his eyes. I know I'm weak. Everyone tells me. I'm quirkless. He waited for the rejection. He waited for the oh, well, be a policeman speech. Gang Orca's expression didn't change. And? Izuku blinked. And? I can't do anything. You have eyes, don't you? Orca pointed a massive, gloved finger at the shipping containers behind them. You have a brain, presumably, underneath that mess of hair? Being quirkless makes you physically limited. It does not make you blind. Yet you sit here, staring at your feet, while a crime is being committed 50 meters behind you. Huh! Izuku spun around. At first, he saw nothing. Just the rows of blue and red metal containers. But then, prompted by Orca's words, he looked harder. He focused. There, in the shadow of a crane, 3 men were moving crates from a small fishing boat into a van. They were moving with urgency, looking over their shoulders. One of them had arms that looked like jagged piles of scrap metal, a mutation quirk. Smugglers, Gang Orca rumbled, stepping up beside Izuku. Moving illegal trigger supports. I've been tracking them for an hour. I was waiting for their buyer to arrive to net the whole school. You knew they were there, and you stopped to talk to me? Izuku asked, bewildered. I can multitask. And you were interfering with my stakeout by moping loudly, Orca grunted. Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed through the docks. One of the smugglers had dropped a crate. The contents spilled out, gleaming, red ampoules. Damn it! The smuggler with the metal arms shouted. Load it up. Forget the rest. They're spooked, Orca growled. Plan B. The hero took a step forward, ready to unleash his power, but the smugglers spotted them. Hero. the lookout screamed. It's the orca! Go! Go! The driver of the van slammed on the gas. The man with the metal arms, the leader clearly, didn't run for the van. He turned, his eyes wild with panic. He saw Gang Orca, a wall of power, and he knew he couldn't fight that. But he saw something else. He saw a small, skinny boy in a middle school uniform standing next to the hero. Izuku didn't even have time to scream. The villain moved with the desperate speed of a cornered rat. He lunged, his legs acting like springs. He bypassed Orca, who had been preparing a sonic blast for the van, and aimed straight for the weak link. A cold, metallic hand clamped around Izuku's throat. Don't move! The villain shrieked, hauling Izuku off the ground. The metal on his arms shifted, turning into sharp, rotating blades that were dangerously close to Izuku's ear. One step, Orca! One step and the kid gets turned into ground beef. The world spun. Izuku couldn't breathe. The smell of rust and unwashed sweat filled his nose. He was dangling, his feet kicking uselessly at the air. I'm a hostage. The thought was detached, clinical. This is a standard villain tactic. Use a civilian shield to force a standoff. Gang Orca stopped. He stood 10 meters away, his hands in his pockets. He didn't look worried. He looked annoyed. Let the boy go, Orca said, his voice flat. You are only adding kidnapping to your list of charges. It is unwise. Shut up. Shut up. The villain's grip tightened. Izuku clawed at the metal arm, but it was like scratching a steel beam. Back off. I'm walking out of here, and I'm taking the brat with me. Izuku wheezed, black spots dancing in his vision. I'm going to die. I'm going to die here, and I never even tried. No. His eyes darted to the villain's arm. The metal plates. They were shifting, rotating like a chainsaw chain. A transformation quirk? No, mechanical manipulation. Izuku's mind, trained by years of obsessive analysis, kicked into gear despite the fear. The sound. It's grinding. High-pitched squeal. Friction. He looked closer at the villain's elbow joint, right next to his face. There was a gap in the plating. A small, exposed piston that was glowing red with heat. It's overheating. He's pushing the quirk too hard. If I can jam it, I said back off. The villain screamed, swinging Izuku around like a rag doll. Izuku reached into his pocket. His fingers brushed against a pen. A cheap, plastic ballpoint pen he used for school. It won't hold. But it might cause a momentary seize. Boy Orca's voice cut through the panic. He wasn't looking at the villain. He was looking directly into Izuku's eyes. Are you going to dangle there until you expire? Or are you going to do something? It wasn't a plea for help. It was a challenge. Izuku grit his teeth. Tears streamed down his face, but a spark of defiance ignited in his gut. I am not a pebble. With a choked cry, Izuku jammed the plastic pen into the exposed piston mechanism of the villain's arm with every ounce of strength he possessed. Crack! The pen shattered instantly. But the plastic shards lodged in the gears. The whirring blade stuttered. The villain roared in surprise as his arm jerked, the mechanism locking up for a fraction of a second. You little! The grip on Izuku's throat loosened just enough. Izuku gasped, dragging in a lungful of air. It wasn't enough to escape. He was still held fast, and now the villain was furious. The other arm raised, blade spinning, ready to decapitate him. But a fraction of a second was all the number 10 hero needed. Gang Orca didn't run. He opened his mouth. A sound like the tearing of the fabric of reality erupted. It wasn't just loud, it was physical. A focused, hypersonic wave that distorted the air, ripping across the gap between them. Hypersonic! The blast hit the villain with the force of a freight train, but with the precision of a scalpel. It was calculated perfectly to impact the villain's nervous system without liquefying the hostage. The villain's eyes rolled back in his head. His muscles seized. The metal arms went limp, the blades stopping instantly. Izuku fell. He hit the concrete hard, scraping his knees and hands. He scrambled away, coughing, gasping for air, clutching his bruised throat. The villain collapsed face first onto the pavement, twitching but unconscious. Silence returned to the docks, save for the distant sirens of approaching police. Izuku lay on his back, staring up at the gray sky. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was alive. He was alive. A shadow fell over him. Gang Orca stood there, looking down. He adjusted his fedora, dusting a speck of dirt off his white coat. "You're reckless," Orca said. Izuku pushed himself up to a sitting position, wincing. I saw a weakness. The joint. It was overheating. "I saw it too," Orca said. "I was waiting for him to shift his weight so I could fire without hitting you. You jamming a piece of plastic into a hydraulic press didn't save you. It just annoyed him." Izuku's shoulders slumped. "Oh. I made it worse. You created an opening," Orca corrected. "A clumsy, desperate, suicidal opening. But an opening nonetheless." The hero crouched down, bringing him eye level with Izuku. Up close, his orca-like features were terrifying, but there was an intelligence in those eyes that was mesmerizing. "You said you are quirkless," Orca said. "Yes. And yet, when death had you by the throat, you attacked. You analyzed. You acted." Orca's voice lowered, a deep rumble. "Most people with quirks would have just screamed for help. They wait for a hero to swoop in and solve the problem." Izuku looked at his hands. They were shaking. "I just didn't want to die." "Fear is a tool," Orca said. "Panic is a poison. You managed to use the fear. But you lack the power to back it up." The sirens were getting louder. "The police would be here in seconds." "Tell me, boy," Orca asked, "what is your name?" "Midoriya." "Izuku Midoriya." "Midoriya. Look at me." Izuku looked up. "Society looks at me and sees a villain," Gang Orca said, gesturing to his monstrous face. "They see teeth. They see a beast. I am ranked third in heroes who look like villains. People fear me, and yet I save them. I force them to acknowledge my heroism through sheer competence." He leaned in closer. "You are the opposite. You look like nothing. You look like a victim. The world has judged you as empty space." Izuku swallowed hard. "I know. So change the narrative," Orca snapped. "Do you want to be the poor, quirkless boy who needs saving? Or do you want to be the thing that the darkness fears?" Something inside Izuku shifted. All his life, he had wanted All Might to tell him, "You can be a hero." He wanted the warm embrace, the reassurance that his heart was enough. Gang Orca wasn't offering warmth. He wasn't offering reassurance. He was offering a weapon. Izuku's voice cracked. He clenched his fists, feeling the scrape of the concrete against his palms. "I want to save people. I want to be a hero. I don't care if they look down on me. I want to be able to do something." Orca studied him for a long moment. He seemed to be weighing the boy's soul, testing its density. "You have a tactical mind," Orca admitted. "I heard you muttering earlier. You dissected that villain's weakness in seconds under extreme duress. That is a talent. But your body is weak. It is frail. If I were to train you, it would not be like the pretty hero courses. It would not be glamorous." Orca stood up to his full height, casting a long shadow over Izuku. "I will not teach you to wave to the cameras. I will not teach you to be a symbol of peace. I will teach you to survive in the deep. I will teach you to drag your enemies down into the pressure where they cannot breathe, and crush them." He extended a hand. It was massive, leather-clad, and intimidating. "My training is held disguised as water, Midoriya. You will likely quit in a week. But if you want to be more than a pebble on the road..." Izuku looked at the hand. He thought of Bakugo's explosion. He thought of the burned notebook. He thought of the swan dive. He thought of the feeling of helplessness as the villain held him. He didn't want to feel that again. He didn't want to be the person waiting for All Might to arrive. Izuku reached out. His hand was tiny compared to Orca's. He gripped the hero's hand, his fingers trembling but his grip surprising firm. "I won't quit," Izuku said, staring into the white ringed eyes of the orca. "Teach me." Gang Orca's mouth didn't move into a smile. His physiology didn't really allow for it, but his eyes gleamed with a savage approval. "Good," Orca growled. "Meet me at the Oki Mariner Agency tomorrow at 0500 hours. Bring a swimsuit." "And Midoriya?" "Yes, sir." "Don't bring that notebook. You're going to be too busy cleaning the shark tank to write." The police cruisers skidded onto the docks, officers spilling out with guns drawn, shouting orders. Gang Orca turned to address them, his cape billowing in the sea breeze. Izuku stood behind him, legs shaking, throat bruised, scraped, and bloody. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was drowning. He felt like he was learning how to swim. Later that evening, Izuku walked through the door of his apartment. It was late. His mother, Inko, rushed to the door, her face pale with worry. Izuku! You're so late. I was about to call the, oh my goodness. Your neck! Your clothes! She fluttered around him, tears instantly springing to her eyes. What happened? Did you fall? Were you bullied again? Oh, my poor baby. I'm okay, Mom, Izuku said, wincing as she touched the bruise on his neck. There was an incident. At the docks. The docks? Why were you at the docks? Inko ushered him to the couch, running to get the first aid kit. I saw on the news there was a villain attack. Gang Orca was there. Was that? Did you get caught up in that? Yeah, Izuku said softly. But I'm fine. The heroes saved me. Inko returned with disinfectant and bandages, sobbing quietly as she tended to his wounds. I worry about you so much, Izuku. The world is so dangerous. Maybe you should just come straight home from now on. Maybe we should look at other schools. She was doing it again. Loving him by trying to hide him. Loving him by assuming he was made of glass. Mom, Izuku said. Inko stopped, holding a bandage midair. Yes, sweetie? I met someone today. A pro-hero. Inko's eyes widened. Oh? Did he say you were brave? No, Izuku said. A small, strange smile touched his lips. He called me weak. He called me prey. Inko looked horrified. That's terrible. I'm going to report. But Izuku interrupted, taking his mother's hand. He offered to train me. Inko froze. She looked at her son. Really looked at him. She saw the bruise on his neck, the dirt on his cheek. But she also saw something in his green eyes that hadn't been there at breakfast. A steeliness, a quiet resolve. Train you? She whispered. To be a hero? To be strong, Izuku corrected. He knows I'm quirkless. He doesn't care. He said if I want to survive, I have to learn how to swim. He squeezed her hand. I'm going to do it, Mom. I'm going to train with him. I'm not going to give up on you. Inko searched his face for the doubt, the fear that usually resided there. It was gone, replaced by a terrifying focus. She realized, with a pang of maternal heartache, that her little boy wasn't looking for permission. He was informing her. Who? Inko sniffled, wiping her eyes. Who is this hero? Gang Orca, Izuku said. Inko blinked. The scary whale man? Yeah. Izuku chuckled, a dry sound. The scary whale man. He stood up, heading toward his room. He needed to sleep. He had to be up at 4 a.m. to make it to the agency by 5 o'clock. Izuku? He paused at his door. Yeah, Mom? Inko bit her lip. She wanted to tell him it was too dangerous. She wanted to tell him to stop chasing a ghost. But she remembered the years of apologizing to him, of crying over him. Maybe that hadn't helped. Be careful, she said instead. Izuku nodded. I will. He entered his room. The walls were covered in All Might posters. The smiling face of the symbol of peace beamed down at him from every angle. Everything is fine. Why? Because I am here. Izuku stared at the posters. I am here, Izuku whispered. He didn't take the posters down. But he walked over to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a fresh notebook. He didn't write hero analysis on the cover. He uncapped a pen and wrote, in bold, jagged strokes, Predator Tactics Vol 1. He set the alarm on his clock. 4:30 a.m. Izuku Midoriya lay down in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The ocean was waiting. And tomorrow, he would dive in. The alarm clock didn't buzz, it screamed. At 4:30 a.m., the world was not merely dark, it was a void. Outside the window of the Midoriya apartment, the city of Muzudafu was a sleeping giant, its breathing measured in the distant hum of traffic on the highway. Inside, Izuku Midoriya lay paralyzed, his arm outstretched toward the clock, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He hadn't slept. Not really. He had spent the night drifting in a shallow, restless doze, his mind replaying the sensation of the villain's metal arm against his throat, followed by the terrifying, awe-inspiring boom of the hypersonic wave. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the white, ringed eyes of Gang Orca staring into his soul, dissecting him, judging the weight of his existence. "I will teach you to survive in the deep." Izuku slapped the alarm off, the silence rushing back in to fill the room. He sat up, shivering in the cool morning air. His room, usually a sanctuary of bright colors and All Might's smiling face, felt different. The posters were the same, but they felt distant. Like artifacts from a childhood he had outgrown overnight. He moved mechanically. Brush teeth. Wash face. The face in the mirror looked pale, the freckles standing out like constellations on a stark map. There were dark circles under his eyes, but the eyes themselves were wide, wired with adrenaline. He dressed quietly, pulling on an old tracksuit. It was loose on his frame. He was skinny, scrawny even. No cork to bulk his muscles, no natural strength to rely on. Just bones and anxious energy. In the kitchen, he scribbled a note for his mother, went for a run. "Don't worry, Izuku." He paused, the pen hovering over the paper. He added a small smiley face, though he didn't feel like smiling. He felt like he was walking to his execution. He grabbed a protein bar from the pantry, shoved it into his pocket, and stepped out into the pre-dawn gloom. The train ride to the harbor district was eerie. The car was empty save for a sleeping salaryman and a woman with a mutation quirk that gave her the head of a heron, who was reading a newspaper. The fluorescent lights hummed, flickering occasionally. Izuku sat with his knees pressed together, his hands gripping his backpack straps. Inside the bag was a towel, a change of clothes, and a water bottle. He had left the notebook, Predator Tactics Volume 1, at home, per instructions. It felt like leaving a limb behind. How was he supposed to learn if he couldn't document it? He pulled out his phone, scrolling through the Hero Network forums out of habit. Thread, Gang Orca spotted at Dagoba Beach? User AllMightFan_99, saw him yelling at a kid. Weird. User Deep Blue, Orca's scary man. I heard he eats raw squid for breakfast. Izuku swallowed hard. He was walking into the den of the number 10 hero. A man who looked like a villain, sounded like a villain, and fought with the brutality of a natural disaster. Why did I agree to this? The doubt whispered in his ear, sounding suspiciously like Katsuki Bakugo. You're a pebble, Deku. You're going to break. No, Izuku thought, clenching his fists until his nails bit into his palms. I'm already broken. I'm going there to see if I can be put back together. The train announced the harbor station. Izuku stood up. The doors slid open, and the smell hit him instantly. Salt, brine, old fish, and diesel fuel. It was the smell of the ocean, stripped of its romanticism. He walked out of the station and toward the coastline. The sky was beginning to turn a bruised purple in the east, but the streetlights still buzzed overhead. Ahead, looming against the dark water, was the Oki Mariner Public Aquarium. It wasn't just a tourist attraction, it was the headquarters of the Oki Mariner Agency. It was a massive structure of curved concrete and reinforced glass, shaped vaguely like a breaching whale. At this hour, it looked less like a place of wonder and more like a fortress. Izuku approached the service entrance gate. A security camera swiveled, its red eye fixing on him. State your business, a voice crackled from the intercom. I'm Izuku Midoriya, he stammered. I'm here to see, Mr. Sakamada? Gang Orca? There was a pause. Then a buzz. The heavy steel gate clicked and slid open. Izuku took a breath, held it, and stepped inside. The interior of the agency was cold. It was a labyrinth of service corridors, pipes, and the constant, low-frequency thrum of massive filtration pumps. It sounded like the building had a heartbeat. He was met by a sidekick. The man was dressed in a sleek, black wetsuit-style uniform with a white dorsal fin pattern on the back. He wore a visor that obscured his eyes. You the kid? The sidekick asked. His voice was bored. Why, yes, sir. Boss is in the main atrium. Don't touch anything. Don't look at the sharks wrong. Follow me. Izuku followed the sidekick through the winding halls. They passed massive windows looking into dimly lit tanks where dark shapes glided silently. Izuku felt small. The sheer volume of water surrounding him, separated only by glass, was oppressive. They emerged into the main atrium. It was a cavernous space, dominated by the open ocean tank, a massive, multi-story cylinder of water teeming with tuna, rays, and sharks. The blue light from the tank cast rippling shadows across the floor. Standing in front of the glass, back to Izuku, was Gang Orca. Without the trench coat and fedora, he was even more terrifying. He wore a tight, sleeveless black bodysuit that highlighted the sheer density of his musculature. His skin, smooth, black and white like the cetacean he shared his DNA with, gleamed under the tank lights. "You're 2 minutes early," Orca's voice rumbled, vibrating through the floor. I didn't want to be late," Izuku squeaked. Orca turned slowly. His white, ringed eyes locked onto Izuku. "Punctuality is the first step. Competence is the second. We shall see if you can manage that." He walked over to a metal table set up near the tank and picked up a clipboard. Izuku Midoriya. Age 14. Student at Aldera Junior High. Grades, exemplary. Physical fitness, negligible. Quirk. Orca paused. He looked at the paper, then at Izuku. "The file I pulled up says quirkless." This was it. The moment of rejection. The moment the paperwork caught up to the reality. "Yes, sir," Izuku whispered, staring at his shoes. "I don't have a quirk." He waited for the sigh. He waited for the kid, "You're gonna get yourself killed" speech. Instead, a sound echoed through the atrium. A dry, hacking sound. Ha! 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 Izuku looked up. Gang Orca was laughing. It wasn't a mocking laugh, exactly. It was the laugh of someone who had just seen a mouse try to fight a tank. It was a laugh of pure disbelief. "Quirkless," Orca repeated, tossing the clipboard onto the table with a clatter. "You walked into a hostage situation involving a villain with a mechanical augmentation quirk, armed with a plastic pen and zero power. I didn't think." Clearly, Orca interrupted. He stepped closer, looming over Izuku like a tidal wave. "Do you know why I agreed to train you, Midoriya? Because you saw potential?" Izuku hoped. "Because you are insane," Orca said flatly. "And because insanity, if directed properly, looks a lot like courage." He began to pace around Izuku, inspecting him like a piece of faulty machinery. "I am a heteromorph," Orca began, his voice taking on a lecture tone. "My quirk gives me the physiology of an Orcinus orca. I have enhanced strength, durability, sonar, and the ability to generate hypersonic waves." "But do you know what the public sees when they look at me?" Izuku hesitated. A hero? They see a monster," Orca corrected Hershey. "They see teeth. They see black eyes. They see a villain. I am consistently ranked in the top 10 of heroes who look like villains. Parents pull their children closer when I walk by. When I save someone, their first reaction is often fear, not relief." He stopped in front of Izuku. "I have to work twice as hard as All Might to be accepted. I have to be perfect. I have to be undeniable. Because if I make a mistake, they don't say the hero made a mistake. They say the monster lost control." Izuku nodded slowly, absorbing the words. He had never thought about it like that. He just assumed having a strong quirk made life easy. "Now look at you," Orca continued, poking Izuku in the chest with a hard finger. "You are the opposite. You look like a victim. You look like something that exists to be saved. You have no quirk to make you special. You have no claws. No fire. No speed." "I know," Izuku said, the old shame bubbling up. "So," Orca leaned down, his face inches from Izuku's. "If I have to work twice as hard to be loved, you must work 3 times as hard to be respected. You cannot afford to be average. You cannot afford to be good. Without a quirk, you must be a force of nature. You must be so skilled, so terrifyingly competent, that the question of your power never even comes up." "Can I?" Izuku asked, his voice trembling. "Can I really do that? Without a quirk?" "A shark does not have a quirk," Orca said, gesturing to the tank behind him. "It has teeth, muscle, and instinct. And it rules the ocean. The question is not whether you can, Midoriya. The question is whether you will survive the process of becoming one." Orca turned and pointed a finger toward a side door. Go change. Put on the wetsuit in the locker. Meet me at the Leviathan tank in 5 minutes. Wetsuit? Izuku blinked. Are we swimming? Orca grinned, showing rows of flat, terrifying teeth. Swimming is for tourists. You are going to learn what it means to sink. The wetsuit was tight. It smelled of rubber and chlorine. Izuku felt ridiculous in it, his scrawny limbs sticking out like twigs. He walked to the designated area, a massive, open-top tank in the back of the facility. It was drained halfway, the water level sitting at about chest height for an adult, but overhead for Izuku. The walls were covered in thick, green algae. The water was murky. This is the reserve tank, Orca announced, standing on the gantry above. It holds 300,000 gallons. It has not been cleaned in 2 months. The automated scrubbers are broken. He tossed a heavy, bristled brush down. It clattered at Izuku's feet. Clean it. Izuku stared at the brush. Then at the massive tank. All of it? Every inch, Orca said. And Midoriya? Yes? I'm filling it back up. Orca pressed a button on a console. A massive pipe roared to life, and cold, salty seawater began to pour into the tank. The water will rise, Orca shouted over the noise. You have to scrub the walls. As the water gets deeper, you will have to tread water. Eventually, you will have to dive. You will learn to work while suffocating. You will learn to manage your oxygen. If you panic, you waste air. If you waste air, you surface. If you surface too much, you don't finish. Wait. That's how fast is it filling? Izuku yelled, panic rising. Fast enough, Orca replied coldly. Begin. Izuku scrambled into the tank. The water was freezing. It shocked the air from his lungs. It was already at his waist. He grabbed the brush. It was weighted, heavy steel, and started scrubbing the slime off the concrete wall. Scrub. 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 It was hard work. The algae was thick and stubborn. His arms burned within the first 5 minutes. The water rose. Knees. Waist. Chest. By the time the water reached his chin, Izuku was panting. The cold was seeping into his bones, making his muscles stiff. He had to tread water now, kicking his legs to stay afloat while trying to apply pressure to the wall with the brush. This is impossible, Izuku thought. I can't get leverage if I'm floating. He slipped under the surface, holding his breath. He grabbed a metal grate on the wall with one hand to anchor himself and scrubbed furiously with the other. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. 30. His lungs burned. Not the sharp pain of a stitch, but the deep, desperate ache of oxygen deprivation. He kicked up to the surface, gasping. Too slow. Orca's voice boomed from above. You're breathing like a dying seal. Control your heart rate. Panic consumes oxygen. Izuku dove again. The water was getting deeper. 6 feet. 8 feet. The pressure on his ears increased. The light from above grew dimmer. He was alone in the murk. Just him, the brush, and the wall. Think, Izuku told himself, his mind trying to retreat into analysis to escape the pain. Why this? Why cleaning? It's basically the Karate Kid wax-on wax-off thing, isn't it? He analyzed the motion. Scrubbing strengthens the deltoids, the lats, the grip's strength. Treading water builds the core and the quads. Holding my breath expands lung capacity. But it was more than that. It was the isolation. Down here, with the water pressing in on all sides, there was no All Might. There were no heroes. There was just the crushing weight. If I give up, Izuku thought, his vision blurring as he scrubbed a particularly stubborn patch of slime, I'm just proving them right. I'm proving Kaken right. He thought of Bakugo's smirk. He thought of the swan dive. A surge of anger bubbled up in his chest. Not hot, fiery anger. Cold, dark anger. He stayed under for 45 seconds. Then 50. When he finally surfaced, he didn't gasp frantically. He took a deep, controlled breath, his eyes locking onto Orca's silhouette above. Orca watched him silently. He noticed the change. The boy was no longer flailing. He was working. Keep going, Orca muttered to himself. Let the ocean harden you. By the time the tank was clean, 3 hours had passed. Izuku crawled out of the water and collapsed onto the concrete deck. He couldn't feel his arms. His legs were jelly. He was shivering so violently his teeth chattered like castanets. He vomited seawater into a nearby drain. Pathetic, a voice said. Izuku looked up weakly. One of the sidekicks, a woman with sharp features and gills on her neck, tossed a towel at his head. Drink this, she said, placing a bottle of warm, electrolyte-heavy fluid next to him. Boss says you have 30 minutes to metabolize? Then we hit the beach. The beach? Izuku wheezed. You didn't think you were done, did you? She smirked. That was the warm-up. Izuku groaned, rolling onto his back. Every muscle fiber screamed in protest. He wanted to go home. He wanted to crawl into his bed and never leave. But then he looked at his hands. They were raw, the skin pruned and white, the knuckles scraped. But they weren't shaking anymore. He sat up and drank the fluid. It tasted like salty lemon, but he forced it down. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a garbage dump. Mountains of trash, scrap metal, and discarded appliances littered the sand. It was a monument to apathy. All Might is planning to clean a section of this beach, Gang Orca said, standing on the seawall, looking out at the trash. He wants to restore the view. A noble goal. But we are not here to clean. He pointed to the shoreline, where the waves crashed violently against the sand. We are here for drag. Orca gestured to a pile of objects near his feet. There were no tires. There were heavy, rusted anchor chains, bundled together with thick rope. Heroism is resistance, Orca lectured. It is moving against the current. The world tries to push you back, and you must push forward. He walked over to Izuku and clipped a harness around the boy's waist. The harness was attached to the bundle of chains. The sand provides friction. The water provides resistance. The chains provide weight. You will drag this load from the waterline to the seawall. Then you will drag it back. You will do this until I tell you to stop. Izuku looked at the chains. They must have weighed 50 kilograms at least. On pavement maybe? But in wet sand? Move! Orca barked. Izuku leaned forward, digging his feet into the sand. The harness dug into his shoulders. The chains didn't move. Engage your core! Orca shouted. Drive with your legs. Don't pull with your back, you'll snap your spine. Lower your center of gravity. Izuku dropped his hips. He gritted his teeth and pushed. Scritch. The chains moved an inch. Scritch. Another inch. It was agonizing. The sand shifted under his feet, robbing him of traction. The waves crashed into his legs, knocking him off balance. Every step was a battle. Why are you doing this? Orca yelled over the wind. Why are you here? To be a hero. Izuku grunted, straining against the weight. Wrong. Orca stepped into his path, blocking him. Every kid in that school wants to be a hero. They want the fame. They want the costume. What do you want? Izuku slipped, face planting into the wet sand. He tasted grit. He lay there, the weight of the chains pinning him down. What do I want? He wanted to save people. That was true. But was it just that? He remembered the doctor telling him he was quirkless. He remembered his mother crying, apologizing. He remembered the look in everyone's eyes, the pity, the dismissal. He didn't just want to save people. He wanted to prove that he could. He wanted to prove that he existed. Izuku pushed himself up, spitting sand. His eyes burned with salt water and tears. I want. Izuku shouted, his voice cracking. I want to show them. I want to show everyone who looked down on me that they were wrong. I want to stand on top. Gang Orca looked down at him. The hero's expression was unreadable, but he stepped aside. Then stand up, Orca commanded. And pull. Izuku pulled. He pulled until the sun began to set. He pulled until his hands bled. He pulled until his mind went blank, and there was only the rhythm of the waves and the grinding of the chains. Step. Drag. Step. Drag. Passers-by stopped to watch. Some laughed at the scrawny kid struggling in the mud. Some looked concerned. Izuku didn't see them. He only saw the finish line. Evening settled over the agency. The lights of the tanks were dimmed to simulate night for the fish. Izuku sat in the break room, wrapped in a blanket. He held a mug of hot tea with trembling hands. He felt lighter somehow. Like his body had been hollowed out and scraped clean. Gang Orca entered the room. He had changed back into his white suit, though he wasn't wearing the coat. He grabbed a raw squid from a cooler and bit the head off casually. You didn't quit, Orca noted, chewing. No, Izuku rasped. Tomorrow, you will hurt more, Orca promised. Your muscles will tear. Your joints will swell. You will regret coming here. Okay, Izuku said. Orca sat down opposite him. The table creaked under his weight. Physical strength is only half the equation, Midoriya. Especially for someone like you. You cannot outpunch All Might. You cannot outblast Endeavor. If you fight fair, you will lose. So, I have to cheat? No. You have to dominate, Orca said. We call it extra guidance in my agency. It is the art of presence. It is the ability to win the fight before the first punch is thrown. Orca leaned forward. The air in the room seemed to get heavier. A palpable aura of dread radiated from him. It triggered a primal instinct in Izuku's lizard brain. Run. Predator. Danger. Look at me, Orca commanded. What do you feel? Fear, Izuku admitted, shrinking back. Good. Fear creates hesitation. Hesitation creates openings. You must learn to project this. But I'm just me, Izuku said. I'm not scary. I look like this. He gestured to his round face and fluffy hair. Fear is not about looking like a monster, Orca said. It is about intent. It is about the absolute certainty that you can and will hurt the person in front of you if they do not submit. Civilians panic. Heroes posture. Predators focus. Orca tapped his own temple. You analyze, Midoriya. You see weaknesses. I saw you do it on the docks. When you look at an enemy, you don't just see a villain. You see a broken piston. You see a flaw in their stance. You see the inevitable conclusion of their defeat. I guess. Project that, Orca said intensely. When you look at someone, don't look at them as a person. Look at them as a problem to be solved. Dissect them with your eyes. Let them know that you know exactly how to break them. That is your weapon. The Orca glare is not a quirk. It is a promise of violence. Izuku frowned, trying to understand. He thought about how he analyzed heroes. He looked at their gear, their muscles, their habits. He looked at Gang Orca. Left shoulder dropped slightly. Old injury? He breathes heavily through the blowhole on his head when he's lecturing. He favors his right leg when he stands up. Izuku narrowed his eyes, focusing on that shoulder. Orca paused. He felt it. It was faint, like the brush of a spiderweb, but he felt the boy's gaze shift. It wasn't the fearful look of a victim anymore. It was the clinical, cold assessment of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. Better, Orca grunted, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. But you look constipated. We will work on it. He stood up. Go home, Midoriya. Eat protein. Sleep. If you are late tomorrow, I will feed you to the sharks. Yes, sir. Izuku stood up, bowing deeply. Thank you, sir. The walk to the station was painful. Every step sent shocks up Izuku's legs. But his mind was racing. Predator Tactics Volume 1. He needed to write this down. The lung training. The resistance drag. The psychological warfare. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't notice the figure standing under the streetlight until he was almost upon him. Deku. Izuku froze. The voice was low, sharp, and familiar. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, hands in his pockets, his school bag slung over one shoulder. He looked angry. But then again, Bakugo always looked angry. Keikaken, Izuku stammered, the old fear flaring up. He instinctively hunched his shoulders. Then, Orca's voice echoed in his head. Shoulders back. Do not be prey. Izuku forced himself to straighten his spine. It hurt, but he did it. What are you doing here? Bakugo demanded, eyeing Izuku's wet hair and the gym bag. This is the harbor district. You live on the other side of town. I was training, Izuku said. Training? Bakugo scoffed. Playing hero in the mud? Don't make me laugh. You're quirkless, Deku. You can train until you die, and you'll still be a bug. He took a step forward, small explosions popping in his palms. Usually Izuku would flinch. He would step back. But tonight, Izuku was tired. He was exhausted deep in his soul. And after staring into the eyes of Gang Orca, after facing the crushing weight of the deep water, Bakugo's explosion seemed smaller, lighter. Izuku didn't step back. He looked at Bakugo. He looked at the palms, sweat glands, nitroglycerin. Right hook is his opening move. He leads with his shoulder. Izuku didn't glare. He just looked. He dissected. For a split second Bakugo hesitated. He felt something weird. It wasn't defiance. He was used to defiance. It was something colder. It was as if Deku wasn't looking at him, but through him. I'm going to Ua, Kaken, Izuku said softly. Ha! Bakugo bristled, the confusion turning to rage. You look down on me? You think you can. I don't think I can beat you, Izuku interrupted. Not yet. But I'm going to try. And I'm not going to take a dive. He adjusted his bag and walked past Bakugo. See you at school. Izuku walked away, his heart pounding in his chest. He expected an explosion to hit him in the back. He waited for the impact. It didn't come. Bakugo stood under the streetlight, watching the nerd limp away. He lowered his hands, the smoke curling from his fingers. He scowled, confusion gnawing at his gut. What the hell was that? Bakugo thought. His eyes, they looked dead. Izuku made it home. He ate dinner mechanically, listening to his mother talk about her day, nodding at the right times. When he finally collapsed into bed, he felt the ache in his muscles settle into a dull thrum. He closed his eyes. He didn't dream of All Might tonight. He dreamed of the ocean. Dark, deep, and silent. He was sinking into it. But in the dream, he wasn't drowning. He was breathing the water. He was moving through the dark, hunting. And somewhere in the darkness, a great white orca swam beside him, guiding him into the abyss. Sink or swim, Izuku thought as sleep finally took him. I'm going to swim. Time is not a straight line. For Izuku Midoriya, the last 7 months had been a spiral, a downward descent into a pressure zone where the weak were crushed and the strong were hardened into diamonds. The seasons changed. The cherry blossoms of spring rotted into the wet heat of summer, which then bled into the crisp, dying leaves of autumn. But inside the Oki Mariner Agency, there were no seasons. There was only the water. The water was constant. It was indifferent. It did not care if Izuku was tired. It did not care if his lungs burned or his muscles screamed. It simply existed, heavy and suffocating, demanding that he adapt or drown. So, Izuku adapted. Month 3, the silence of the deep. Again. The command was spoken softly, but it carried through the water of the training tank with perfect clarity. Izuku hung suspended in the deep end of the Leviathan tank. He was 20 feet down, weighted by a belt of lead bricks. He wasn't wearing an oxygen tank. He was wearing black swim trunks and a pair of goggles. In front of him, hovering effortlessly in the water, was Gang Orca. The pro-hero looked entirely at home, his massive form displacing the water with the grace of the apex predator he was. He held a waterproof stopwatch. 2 minutes, 30 seconds, Izuku's mind supplied. Heart rate, 45 beats per minute. Oxygen saturation dropping. Izuku wasn't just holding his breath. He was solving a Rubik's Cube. It sounded ridiculous. It sounded like a parlor trick. But it was torture. The mental exertion required oxygen. The panic of the depths demanded oxygen. The trick was to divorce the mind from the body's panic signals. To think clearly while dying. Izuku's fingers, pale and wrinkled from hours of submersion, clicked the plastic tiles into place. Red face complete. Blue face, edge piece missing. His diaphragm spasmed. The air hunger, that primal scream of the brain demanding a breath, kicked in. In the past, Izuku would have scrambled for the surface. Now, he simply acknowledged the signal and suppressed it. Panic is a poison, Orca's voice echoed in his memory. Analyze the panic. Discard it. Izuku turned the final row. Click. He held up the completed cube. Gang Orca nodded once. He pointed a finger upward. Izuku didn't scramble. He unbuckled the weight belt, letting it fall to the tank floor, and kicked his legs. His movement was efficient, a dolphin kick that propelled him upward with minimal drag. He broke the surface. He didn't gasp. He didn't wheeze. He exhaled the carbon dioxide in a sharp, controlled burst, then inhaled deeply, filling his expanded lung capacity to the brim. 2 minutes, 45 seconds, Gang Orca said, surfacing beside him, while performing cognitive tasks. Acceptable. My fingers were sluggish on the last turn, Izuku critiqued himself, treading water. His voice was raspy but steady. I let the hypoxia affect my dexterity. You are human, Orca reminded him, climbing out of the tank and offering a hand. Izuku took it, and Orca hauled him onto the deck like he weighed nothing. But you are becoming a very dangerous human. Izuku stood on the wet concrete, dripping. He walked over to the mirror on the wall of the training bay. The boy in the mirror was different. Gone was the soft, round-faced child who looked like he was made of dough. Izuku hadn't bulked up like All Might. He didn't have the frame for it. Instead, he had become dense. His muscles were lean, corded, and defined, like steel cables wrapped under his skin. His shoulders were broader, his posture rigid. But the biggest change was in the neck and the core. His neck had thickened slightly, reinforced to withstand impacts and whiplash. His torso was a slab of swimmer's muscle, designed for torque and explosive movement. He looked less like a bodybuilder and more like a coiled spring. Or a shark. School begins in an hour, Orca said, throwing a towel at Izuku's head. Don't be late. And remember, you are not a student. You are an observer. Yes, sir, Izuku said, drying his hair. Month 5. The ecosystem of Aldera Junior High. Aldera Junior High had not changed. The lockers were still gray. The linoleum floors still smelled of cheap lemon cleaner. The students still gossiped, laughed, and postured. But Izuku had changed, and the ecosystem of the school didn't know how to handle it. For years, Izuku Midoriya had been the bottom of the food chain. He was the scavenger, the victim, the Deku. He flinched when people walked by. He stammered apologies for existing. He was fun to pick on because he reacted. Now, he was silent. He walked through the halls with a fluid, almost predatory grace. He didn't hunch his shoulders. He didn't hug the walls. He walked down the center of the corridor, his eyes scanning the environment, noting exits, noting clusters of students, noting potential threats. He sat at his desk, staring out the window or reading a book on advanced kinesiology. He didn't mutter anymore. Hey, Deku! The voice came from behind. One of Bakugo's lackeys, the one with the long fingers. He tried to slap the back of Izuku's head as he walked past. In the old days, Izuku would have yelped. This time, Izuku didn't even turn around. At the exact moment the hand approached, Izuku tilted his head 3 inches to the left. The hand whiffed through empty air. The lackey stumbled, off balance. Izuku continued writing in his notebook, not breaking his rhythm. The class went quiet. It was a small thing, but it was unnerving. Did he just dodge? Coincidence? Had to be, but it kept happening. An eraser thrown at his head was caught without looking. A leg stuck out to trip him was stepped over with seamless precision. Izuku wasn't fighting back. He was just existing on a different frequency, and that drove Katsuki Bakugo insane. Bakugo sat at his desk, feet up, glaring at the back of Izuku's head. The nerd was ignoring him. Not the fearful avoidance of before, but a complete, dismissive lack of acknowledgement. It was as if Bakugo was a background noise, like the hum of an air conditioner. He thinks he's better than me, Bakugo thought, his teeth grinding together. He's quirkless. He's a pebble. But he walks around like he's hiding a knife. Bakugo stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Deku. Izuku stopped writing. He slowly capped his pen. We need to talk, Bakugo growled. Roof. Now. Izuku stood up. He picked up his bag. Okay. No stammer. No keikaken. Just okay. The class whispered excitedly. A fight. Finally, Bakugo was going to put the weird, quiet Deku back in his place. The roof of Aldera Junior High was bathed in the orange glow of the afternoon sun. The wind whipped at their uniforms. Bakugo stood near the fence, his palms crackling with small explosions. Izuku stood by the door, his hands at his sides, relaxed. You've been acting weird, Bakugo accused, stepping forward. Walking around like you own the place. Thinking you can apply to UA without a quirk. I am applying, Izuku said calmly. Whether I get in is up to the school, not you. Don't get cocky with me. Bakugo lunged, closing the distance. He grabbed Izuku by the collar, smoke billowing from his hands. You think because you did some push-ups you're tough? You're nothing. I could blow your face off right now. Izuku didn't pull away. He didn't tremble. He breathed in. Smell of nitroglycerin. High concentration. He's sweating more than usual, stress or heat. He looked at Bakugo's hand clutching his collar. Grip is tight, but the wrist is bent at an awkward angle. If I rotate my shoulder and step in, I can break his wrist before he ignites. Then, he looked at Bakugo's face. He didn't see Kaken, his childhood friend. He didn't see the future #1 hero. He saw a target. Izuku's eyes changed. The warmth vanished, replaced by the cold, dead vacuum of the abyss. His pupils constricted. His eyelids lowered slightly. It was the orca glare, the look of a predator assessing the caloric value of its prey. He looked at Bakugo's throat, vulnerable. He looked at his knees exposed. He looked at his eyes' fear response. It wasn't a glare of hatred. It was a glare of dissection. For the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the wind. His explosion sputtered and died. His hand on Izuku's collar loosened involuntarily. It was the lizard brain kicking in. The primal instinct that screams danger when a human locks eyes with a tiger. You! Bakugo whispered, his voice catching. What are you looking at? Izuku blinked. The moment broke. The abyss vanished, replaced by Izuku's normal, slightly tired green eyes. Your stance, Izuku said simply. You lead with your right too much. It leaves your liver open. He gently removed Bakugo's hand from his collar. I have to go, Kaken. I have work. Izuku walked past him. Bakugo stood frozen on the roof. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists, trying to summon the anger, the explosions, the superiority. But all he could feel was the memory of those dead eyes stripping him down to his bones. Damn it! Bakugo screamed, blasting a hole in the chain-link fence. Damn it! But Izuku was already gone. Month 6. Tools of the trade. Your punch is weak. Izuku rubbed his knuckles. He had just punched the heavy bag with everything he had. I know. You have maximized your muscle density for your frame, Gang Orca said, circling him. You are strong for a 14-year-old boy. You are strong for a quirkless human, but compared to a villain with a hardening quirk? Or a mutant type? You are tissue paper. They were in the armory, a workshop in the basement of the Oki Mariner Agency. The walls were lined with support gear, dive tanks, sonic amplifiers, capture nets. I can't hit harder, Izuku admitted, frustrated. Physics is physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. I don't have enough mass. If nature does not give you claws, Orca said, walking to a workbench, you must forge them. He pulled a tarp off a collection of items. I had the support division mock these up based on your combat data. They are prototypes. Ugly, but functional. He picked up a pair of gauntlets. They were matte black, made of a heavy, carbon fiber weave. They covered the forearm and the back of the hand, leaving the fingers exposed for grappling. The knuckles were reinforced with tungsten plates. High-density impact gauntlets, Orca explained. They add weight to your strike, but more importantly, they contain a shock absorption gel layer. You can punch a brick wall and not shatter your hand. You can block a pipe swung by a thug and not break your ulna. Izuku's eyes lit up. He reached out, touching the cold metal. Support items. And these. Orca pointed to a pair of boots. They looked like combat boots crossed with diving greaves. Steel-toed, weighted soles. Magnetic clamps in the heels for stability on metal surfaces. If you kick someone with these, you will break ribs. This puts me on an even playing field? Izuku asked, slipping the gauntlets on. They were heavy, grounding him. No, Orca said sternly. These do not make you All Might. They simply mean you won't break your own body when you fight. You are still fragile, Midoriya. One hit from a powerhouse will end you. These tools are for precision, not brawling. Precision, Izuku repeated. We are shifting your combat training, Orca announced. No more tire dragging. From today, we fight. CQC. Close quarters combat. Judo. Aikido. Krav Maga. You will learn to use an opponent's force against them. You will learn joint locks. You will learn chokes. Orca picked up a melon from the table. He squeezed it. It burst. You cannot overpower them. So you must dismantle them. You snap the wrist. You crush the windpipe. You dislocate the shoulder. It is not pretty. It is not flashy. It is efficient. Izuku looked at the gauntlets. He made a fist. The tungsten knuckles glinted in the harsh light. I understand, Izuku said. I don't need to be flashy. I just need to win. Month 7, the sparring session. The training mats were expansive. The air smelled of sweat and ozone. Begin! Izuku moved. His opponent was Kenji, a sidekick with a crab quirk. He had a carapace covering his torso and pincer-like hands. He wasn't a top-tier hero, but he was a pro. He was strong, durable, and experienced. Kenji lunged, snapping a pincer at Izuku's midsection. Izuku didn't block. Blocking a pincer was suicide. He slid. Using the weighted boots to pivot, Izuku dropped low, sliding under the clumsy swing. He was in Kenji's guard instantly. Carapace is hard. Can't punch the chest. Joints are soft. Izuku grabbed Kenji's wrist, the human part just below the pincer. He used his gauntlet-clad forearm as a fulcrum and twisted. Aikido, Kotegaeshi. Whoa! Kenji yelped as his own momentum flipped him over. He crashed onto the mat. But Kenji was a pro. He rolled with the fall, sweeping his legs to knock Izuku down. Izuku jumped, tucking his knees. He landed on Kenji's carapace, using the villain, currently playing the villain, as a springboard. He backflipped off, creating distance. Slippery little brat. Kenji laughed, getting up. Okay, gloves off. Kenji charged, this time faster. He threw a flurry of jabs. Izuku weaved. His eyes were wide, taking in everything. Left, right, feint, right. He parried a blow with his gauntlet. Clang, the sound of metal on chitin ringing out. The shock absorption gel did its work. Izuku felt the impact, but his arm didn't numb. He saw the opening. Kenji had overextended on a right hook. Izuku stepped in. Instead of punching, Izuku drove his elbow into Kenji's solar plexus. Or he would have, if not for the armor. Instead, he aimed higher. With a fluid motion, Izuku wrapped his arm around Kenji's neck, clamping his other hand onto his own bicep. Rear naked choke. He drove his hips into Kenji's lower back, breaking his posture, and dragged the larger man backward. The weight of Izuku's boots helped drag Kenji down. Tap. Kenji sputtered, tapping his pincer on Izuku's arm. Tap. Tap. Izuku released instantly, stepping back and bowing. Thank you for the match. Kenji sat up, rubbing his neck. Geez, boss. The kid's a python. I thought my neck was gonna pop. Gang Orca stood at the edge of the mat, arms crossed. He didn't clap. You hesitated, Orca said. Izuku stiffened. Sir, when you went for the choke, you checked to make sure you weren't hurting him too much. You loosened the grip for a microsecond. He's a friend. I didn't want to injure him. On the street, hesitation is death, Orca growled. But, he walked over and placed a massive hand on Izuku's head. It was heavy, encompassing the boy's entire skull. Your form was perfect. You used his weight. You exploited the blind spot of his shell. You fought like a predator. Izuku beamed. It was the first time Orca had given him an unqualified compliment on his combat skill. However, Orca continued, removing his hand. You rely too much on the gauntlets to block. If Kenji had been a villain with an acid quirk, your arm would be gone. You must be elusive. Be water, Midoriya. Water flows around the rock. It does not try to smash it. Yes, sir. Go shower. We have a patrol tonight. You're observing from the rooftops. The rooftop vigil. The city at night was a grid of light and shadow. The wind was cold, biting through Izuku's newly acquired tactical hoodie, a dark green, sleeveless number he wore over his compression gear. He crouched on the edge of a 4-story building in the harbor district. Below, Gang Orca was walking the beat, his white coat visible from a mile away. Izuku pressed a finger to his ear. He was wearing an earpiece connected to the agency channel. Check in, Leviathan, Orca's voice crackled. Izuku winced at the code name. Orca insisted on it. Leviathan checking in. Sector 4 clear. No sign of the smuggling ring. Keep your eyes open. The streets are restless tonight. Izuku scanned the alleyways. He used a pair of binoculars, another gift from the agency. He felt powerful. Not in the way All Might was powerful. He couldn't change the weather with a punch. But he felt competent. He knew that if a thug jumped him right now, he could take them down. He knew how to disarm a knife. He knew how to vanish in the dark. He looked at his hand clad in the black gauntlet. 7 months ago, I was crying in a classroom. I was waiting for someone to save me. He clenched his fist. Now I am the one watching from the dark. A commotion in the alley below caught his attention. 2 men cornering a woman. A classic, ugly scenario. Boss, Izuku whispered. Mugging in progress. Alley 3. 2 perps. One has a knife. I am 3 blocks away, Orca replied. Engage only if necessary. Stall them, stall them. Izuku didn't hesitate. He vaulted over the railing. He didn't fly. He fell with style. He grabbed a fire escape railing, swung, dropped to a dumpster, and landed in the alley with a heavy thud caused by his weighted boots. The thugs turned, startled. The woman took the chance to scramble back. Who the hell are you? One thug sneered. Some brat playing hero? Izuku stood up slowly. He adjusted his gauntlets. He didn't smile like All Might. He didn't shout a catchphrase. He lowered his chin. He let the orca glare slip out, cold and heavy. Walk away, Izuku said. His voice was deeper than it used to be. Or you're going to need a surgeon. The thug with the knife laughed. Get him, he lunged. Izuku didn't flinch. He watched the knife. Sloppy arc committed weight. He stepped inside the guard. His left gauntlet knocked the knife hand aside with a metallic clack. His right fist, reinforced with tungsten, drove into the thug's ribs. Crack. The thug folded like a lawn chair, wheezing. The second thug froze. He looked at his partner, then at the scrawny kid in green. Then he looked into Izuku's eyes. He saw the abyss. I'm going. The second thug stammered, dropping his pipe and running. Izuku stood over the groaning man. He checked the woman. Are you okay, ma'am? Yes. Thank you, she whispered, terrified. A moment later, a massive shadow fell over the alley. Gang Orca arrived. He looked at the unconscious thug, then at Izuku. I told you to stall, Orca said. He lunged, Izuku replied simply. I neutralized the threat. Orca looked at the thug's ribs. Then he looked at Izuku. A low rumble started in his chest. A chuckle. Clean hit. Good form. Police are en route. Vanish, Leviathan. Yes, sir. Izuku grabbed the fire escape ladder and hauled himself up into the shadows, disappearing before the sirens arrived. The countdown. 3 months remained until the UA entrance exam. Izuku sat in his room, cleaning his gauntlets. The notebook, Predator Tactics Volume 5, lay open on his desk. It was filled with diagrams of pressure points, escape routes, and quirk counters. He was ready. He wasn't the symbol of peace. He wasn't the sun. He looked at the poster of All Might. The smile was still there, bright and blinding. But Izuku didn't feel the need to mimic it anymore. He looked at a new picture he had tacked up next to it. A grainy photo of Gang Orca holding a villain by the face, looking like a demon from the deep. Izuku smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. I'm not going to be the next All Might, he whispered to the empty room. He strapped the gauntlet onto his arm. Click. Whir. I'm going to be the thing that keeps the villains awake at night. The phone buzzed. A text from Orca. Training at 0400. We are introducing electric shock resistance. Don't eat breakfast. Izuku groaned, but his smile didn't fade. He turned off the light. The darkness of the room didn't scare him. It welcomed him. He was an apex predator in training. And the ocean was wide open. The city of Muzudafa hummed with the electric tension of a Saturday afternoon. It was a noise Izuku Midoriya had learned to filter. 10 months ago, that noise would have been overwhelming. The chatter of the crowds, the blare of traffic, the constant sensory overload of the hero's society. It used to make him shrink into himself, hiding in the hood of his yellow backpack. Now, walking down the street, Izuku heard the city differently. He heard it as a series of rhythms. The heavy tread of a mutation quirk user on the pavement, the distant wail of a police siren, Doppler shifting as it moved away. The rhythmic hiss-clack of the pneumatic doors on the bus. He adjusted the strap of his bag. His knuckles, wrapped in discreet compression tape, brushed against the rough fabric of his trousers. He was tired. It was a deep, bone-settling fatigue that never really went away these days. He had spent the morning at the Oki Mariner Agency, submerged in the simulation tank with the lights off, fighting 3 of Gang Orca's sidekicks while wearing magnetic cuffs that limited his range of motion. "You rely on your eyes too much," Orca had growled, his voice amplified by the water. "The deep is dark. Feel the displacement. Taste the blood in the water." Izuku rolled his neck, feeling a satisfying pop. He checked his phone. Hero News. All Might resolves 3 incidents in under an hour in Tokyo. Izuku stared at the headline. The photo showed All Might laughing, holding a bus with one hand. The symbol of peace. The sun. Izuku swiped the screen off. He respected All Might. He analyzed him religiously. But looking at that bright, primary-colored heroism felt different now. It felt like looking at a star from the bottom of a trench. It was beautiful, but it wasn't his world. His world was pressure, salt, and the crushing reality that if you stopped moving you died. He turned the corner toward the Tatooine shopping district. He needed to buy fresh notebooks. Predator Tactics Volume 8 was nearly full. As he entered the district, the air changed. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a vibration. A low-frequency tremor in the ground. Then came the smell, sewage, rot, and burning sugar. Then, the screaming started. The crowd was a solid wall of backs. People were pushing, shoving, holding up phones to record. "It's a villain! He's got a hostage! Where are the heroes?" Izuku didn't push. He moved through the crowd like water flowing through a grate. He turned his shoulders, stepped into gaps before they fully opened, and slid to the front of the barricade. The scene was a nightmare. An alleyway was engulfed in flames. Explosions, sharp, staccato cracks, ripped through the air. In the center of the inferno was a creature made of dark, viscous fluid. It was a shifting mass of sludge, undulating and growing, and trapped inside it was a boy. Izuku's eyes narrowed. The analysis started instantly, overriding the shock. Villain, fluid body type. Physical attacks are ineffective. They'll pass right through or be absorbed. The explosions are coming from the hostage. Nitroglycerin sweat. The villain is trying to hijack the body. He looked at the heroes standing by the police tape. Death Arms was shouting, lifting a piece of debris but not advancing. "I can't get close. I'll blow him away." Kamui Woods was hesitating, shielding his wooden face from the heat. "The fire. I can't risk it." Empty Lady was stuck behind the archway of the shopping district, crying out, "I need at least a 2-lane road." They were waiting. They were waiting for a hero with the right quirk to show up. They were treating this like a rock-paper-scissors match where they had drawn the wrong hand. Inefficient, a voice that sounded like Gang Orca whispered in Izuku's mind. The job doesn't wait for the right tools. Izuku looked back at the villain. The sludge shifted, revealing a face. 2 wide, terrified red eyes. A mouth gasping for air, submerged in filth. Katsuki Bakugo, the bully. The tormentor. The one who told him to take a swan dive. But right now, Izuku didn't see Kaken the king. He saw a victim drowning in shallow water. Bakugo's eyes locked onto the crowd. He wasn't looking for help anymore. The light in his eyes was fading. He was suffocating. Hypoxia, Izuku noted clinically. Brain damage begins in 4 minutes. Death in 6. Based on the struggle, he's been in there for at least 2. The heroes were still debating strategy. "We have to wait for backdraft. Keep the civilians back. They aren't going to move," Izuku realized. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. They are going to let him die because they are afraid to fail. Izuku didn't think about his legs moving on their own. That was a lie people told to make heroism sound mystical. Izuku moved because he had drilled the response into his nervous system for 10 months. See threat. Assess threat. Neutralize threat. He ducked under the police tape. Hey! Kid! Get back! Death Arm shouted, reaching out. Izuku was already gone. He sprinted. Not the flailing, desperate run of his childhood, but a low, driving sprint. His weighted boots, steel-toed and heavy, slammed into the pavement, cracking the asphalt slightly with each step. Target, the eyes. Weak point of fluid types. Solid mass required for vision. Obstacle, fire. Explosions. Bakugo let out a muffled explosion. The force of it scattered the flames, clearing a momentary path. Izuku took it. You again? The sludge villain roared, his voice bubbling and wet. I'll kill you this time. A tendril of sludge lashed out, moving faster than a whip. Izuku didn't stop. He didn't dodge. He slid, dropping to his knees, the steel plates on his shins sparking against the road. Izuku slid under the tendril. The slime passed inches above his nose, the smell of rot overwhelming. He popped up right in front of the villain. Deku? Bakugo choked out, a bubble of air escaping his lips. The villain laughed. A meat shield. Perfect. The sludge rose up like a tidal wave, crashing down to engulf Izuku. Don't fight the current, Izuku thought. Be the current. He didn't try to punch the sludge away. He took a massive breath, expanding his lungs to their orca-trained capacity, compressing the air in his chest, and he jumped into the villain. The crowd gasped. The heroes screamed. To them, it looked like suicide. The boy had just thrown himself into the monster's maw. Inside the sludge, the world was dark and thick. It felt like swimming in molasses. The pressure was immediate, squeezing him from every angle. The villain was trying to force his way into Izuku's mouth and nose. But Izuku's mouth was clamped shut, his jaw set like iron. He didn't panic. He had spent hours at the bottom of the Leviathan tank holding his breath while solving complex equations. This was just another tank, a dirty, living tank. He opened his eyes. The sludge stung, but he forced them open. There, through the murky darkness, he saw the outline of Bakugo's body. The villain was wrapped around him like a parasite. And deeper, he saw the villain's core. 2 solid orbs floating in the fluid. The eyes. Izuku swam. He clawed his way through the slime, his fingers hooking into the fluid viscosity. The villain panicked. He could feel the foreign object moving inside him. What is this kid doing? Why isn't he struggling to breathe? Izuku reached Bakugo. He grabbed Bakugo's collar with his left hand. With his right hand, he reached into his pocket. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a gadget. But he had a piece of sharp debris he had scooped up during his slide, a jagged shard of glass from a broken shop window. Gang Orca Rule 4. If you lack claws, forge them. Izuku thrust the glass shard toward the floating eye. He didn't aim to kill. He aimed to cause pain. The glass connected. The sludge villain shrieked, a sound that vibrated through the fluid, rattling Izuku's teeth. The slime recoiled violently. The grip on Bakugo loosened. Izuku didn't let go. He kicked. His heavy boots found purchase against the villain's semi-solid mass. He kicked hard, using the villain's own body as a springboard. He burst out of the sludge, dragging Bakugo with him. They tumbled onto the pavement, covered in slime, coughing. Cough you! Bakugo hacked, wiping slime from his eyes. Why? Shut up, Izuku rasped, spitting out a glob of black goo. He stood up, placing himself between Bakugo and the villain. The sludge villain was reforming, one eye shut tight, the fluid bubbling with rage. You little brat! The villain screamed. I'll flay you alive! The slime towered over them, turning into a massive wave of death. Izuku didn't back down. He fell into a stance. Feet wide, center of gravity low, hands raised in the grappling guard Orca had taught him. He looked tiny against the monster, but then, he looked up. He channeled everything. The fear. The anger. The months of drowning. He narrowed his eyes. The green irises seemed to darken, the pupils constricting into pinpricks. The air around him seemed to drop in temperature. The Orca glare. It wasn't a quirk. It was pure, distilled intent. It was the look of a predator that had decided the thing in front of it was food. For a split second, the sludge villain hesitated. He looked at this quirkless, sludge-covered middle schooler and felt a primal shiver of dread. Why isn't he scared? Why is he looking at me like he's going to take me apart? That second was all that mattered, because a second later, the wind changed. I really am pathetic. The voice boomed from the entrance of the alley, louder than the explosions, louder than the crowd. Izuku didn't look back. He knew that voice. I told you the traits of a great champion, but I failed to live up to them myself. There was a blur of motion. A streak of blue and red and gold. Pros are always risking their lives. All Might appeared. He wasn't smiling. He was bleeding from the mouth, steam rising from his body, but his expression was one of furious determination. He stepped in front of Izuku and Bakugo, shielding them with his massive frame. The villain lashed out in panic. All Might pulled back his fist. Detroit. He punched. Not at the villain, but at the air pressure in front of him. Smaaz! The world turned white. The air pressure didn't just hit the villain, it obliterated him. The sludge was scattered into a mist, painted across the walls of the alley, the street, and the sky. The updraft was so powerful it punched a hole in the clouds above. Wind whipped through the street, knocking the other heroes off their feet. Izuku dug his boots into the pavement, grabbing Bakugo by the vest to keep him from blowing away. Then silence, and then rain. Clouds swirled, condensing rapidly from the pressure change. A gentle rain began to fall on the burning street, extinguishing the fires. All Might stood amidst the steam, his fists still raised. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Tears. The chanting of his name. Izuku slowly relaxed his stance. His legs shook. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the pain in his lungs and the stinging of his skin. He looked at All Might's back. It was wide. It was invincible. He saved us, Izuku thought. But, he looked at his own hands covered in grime. I bought him the time. The aftermath was chaotic. The police swarmed the scene, collecting the scattered remains of the villain in plastic bags. Paramedics checked Bakugo, who was sitting on the back of an ambulance, staring at the ground in shock. Izuku was sitting on the curb a few meters away. He was being lectured. You are absolutely insane. Death Arms shouted, pointing a finger in Izuku's face. You're a kid. You have no quirk. You jumped into a hostage situation and nearly got yourself killed. You interfered with professional work. Kamui Woods added, though his tone was less angry and more exasperated. If All Might hadn't arrived, you would be dead alongside the hostage. Do you have a death wish? Empty Lady asked, shrinking down to normal size. Leave this to the pros. Izuku sat there, taking it. He didn't look down in shame. He looked at them. He looked at Death Arms' gloves, heavy lifting. He looked at Kamui Wood's bark, fire weakness. The hostage was dying, Izuku said quietly. That's not the point. Death Arms yelled. The point is protocol. You are a civilian. You were standing there, Izuku said, his voice gaining a hard edge. He stood up. He was shorter than them, but his posture was rigid. You were watching him suffocate because you didn't have the right match. You were letting him die. We were waiting for a suitable quirk. Death Arms argued. That's how hero work is done. You don't just charge in. If you wait for the perfect conditions, a deep, vibrating voice cut through the noise, you are not a hero. You are a weather forecaster. The heroes froze. The crowd fell silent. Walking through the police line was a figure that commanded instant, terrified respect. Gang Orca. He was in full costume, the high-collared white suit, the cape, the terrifying visage. He walked with heavy, deliberate steps. The police officers parted for him like the Red Sea. Orca? Kamui Woods blinked. What are you doing here? This isn't your district. Gang Orca ignored him. He walked straight to Izuku. Izuku straightened up, snapping his heels together. Sir, Orca looked him over. He saw the sludge on the uniform. The cut on Izuku's cheek. The way Izuku was standing, exhausted but unbroken. Report, Orca rumbled. Villain secured by All Might, Izuku said, his voice devoid of emotion. Hostage retrieval successful. Minor injuries to self. Hostage stable. And your method of engagement? Internal disruption, Izuku said. Targeted the eyes to force a release reflex. Used environmental debris. Orca nodded slowly. Reckless. Yes, sir. Effective? Hostage was freed from the airway obstruction before All Might arrived. Orca turned to the other heroes. He loomed over Death Arms, who instinctively took a step back. You scold the boy, Orca growled, his voice low and dangerous. You stand there, fully licensed, fully grown, and you lecture a child for doing the job you were too cowardly to attempt. Now wait a minute! Death Arms bristled. We aren't cowards! My quirk wasn't. Your quirk is strength, Orca snapped. You could have thrown debris to distract. You could have created a wind barrier. You, he pointed at Kamui Woods, could have used your wood to create a lattice to pry the jaw open. But you didn't. You froze. He placed a massive hand on Izuku's shoulder. This boy is my intern. He acted under the doctrine of the Oki Mariner Agency. Action over excuses. The press went wild. Cameras flashed. Gang Orca has an intern? A middle schooler? Is he the successor? We are leaving, Orca said to Izuku. You need a decontamination shower. You smell like a sewer. Yes, sir. As they turned to leave, a voice called out. Wait! It was Bakugo. He had shrugged off the paramedics and was limping over. He looked furious. Humiliated. Confused. Deku! Bakugo shouted. Gang Orca stopped, but he didn't turn. He let Izuku handle it. Izuku turned around. Bakugo stood there shaking. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't need you. I was fine. Don't look down on me, you quirkless reject. I don't owe you anything. It was the same old Bakugo. Pride before everything. Izuku looked at him. Really looked at him. He saw the fear that was still lingering in Bakugo's eyes, masked by anger. You looked like you needed saving, Izuku said simply. He didn't scream back. He didn't apologize. He just stated a fact. And Kaken? Izuku added. You have slime in your ear. He turned and walked away, falling into step beside the massive form of Gang Orca. Bakugo stood there, stunned into silence. They turned a corner, away from the press and the noise. The adrenaline was fully gone now. Izuku stumbled. Orca caught him by the back of his hoodie, holding him up. You did well, Orca said softly. Izuku looked up, surprised. I thought you said I was reckless. You were. Jumping into a fluid villain is suicidal. If he had decided to solidify his core around your head, you would be dead. I calculated the risk, Izuku mumbled. But Orca continued, you moved when no one else did. That is the instinct I cannot teach. The rest, we can fix. I am here. A puff of smoke erupted from around the corner. All Might slid into view. Except, it wasn't the muscular All Might. It was the skeletal, emaciated true form, young Midoriya. All Might coughed, wiping blood from his chin. Oh. He stopped when he saw Gang Orca. Orca looked at the skeleton man. He didn't look surprised. He just narrowed his eyes. All Might, Orca said. Gang Orca, All Might replied, his voice raspy. He straightened up, trying to look dignified despite his appearance. I was hoping to have a word with the boy. He is tired, Orca said, stepping slightly in front of Izuku. And he has training in the morning. It's important, All Might said, his blue eyes intense. He looked at Izuku. Young man. I watched you back there. You moved without thinking, didn't you? Izuku blinked. No, All Might paused. What? I thought about it, Izuku said. I analyzed the villain. I saw the weakness. I saw the heroes doing nothing. So I acted. All Might looked taken aback. This wasn't the answer he expected. He was looking for the body moved on its own speech. The mark of a true hero. Regardless, All Might continued, pressing on. You showed bravery beyond that of any pro on the scene. You, a quirkless boy, inspired me to act. I reached my limit, but seeing you run in, it reminded me of why I do this. All Might clenched his fist over his heart. Young man. I have a question to ask you. I have been looking for a successor. Someone to inherit my power. Izuku's eyes widened. Inherit your power? My quirk, All Might revealed. One for all. It can be passed down. And I believe I believe you are worthy. The world seemed to stop. This was it. The dream. The validation. All Might, the greatest hero, offering him the greatest power. If this had happened 10 months ago, Izuku would have cried. He would have fallen to his knees and said yes 1,000 times. But it wasn't 10 months ago. Izuku looked at All Might's hand. Then he looked at his own hands, scarred, calloused, wrapped in tape. Hands that had dragged chains through the sand. Hands that had scrubbed algae tanks until they bled. He felt the heavy, reassuring presence of Gang Orca beside him. The teacher who hadn't offered him power, but had taught him how to forge his own. All Might, Izuku said softly. Yes? All Might smiled, waiting for the acceptance. I can't. All Might's smile faltered. I'm sorry, you're offering me a way to be like you, Izuku said. To be the symbol of peace. To be the strongest. He looked up at the skeletal hero. But I don't want to be given power. I want to build it. I've spent the last year learning that the world isn't fair, and that I have to fight for every inch I get. If I take your quirk, it feels like I'm admitting that I wasn't enough on my own. Gang Orca let out a sharp breath, a sound of immense pride. Young man, All Might stammered, I understand your pride, but this power, it could save thousands. You could be the pillar. I don't want to be a pillar, Izuku said firmly. Pillars crack. I want to be the ocean. I want to be inevitable. He bowed deeply. Thank you, All Might. Really. It means everything to hear you say that. But I have a teacher. Izuku stood up and looked at Gang Orca. Orca placed his hand on Izuku's head again. He has spoken for, All Might, Orca said, his voice smug. Find another golden boy. This one belongs to the deep. All Might looked between them. He saw the bond. He saw the fierce determination in the boy's eyes, not the starry-eyed worship of a fan, but the steely gaze of a peer in the making. All Might chuckled. It was a sad, but accepting sound. I see, All Might said. I may have been too late. He looked at Izuku one last time. You will be a great hero, young Midoriya. Different. But great. Thank you, sir. All Might turned and walked away, disappearing into the steam. He had missed his chance. The torch would have to go to someone else. Perhaps a boy with engines in his legs? Or a girl with gravity? Or perhaps, the blonde boy with the explosion quirk? You rejected the number one hero, Orca said as they walked toward the station. Yeah, Izuku said, staring at his boots. Why? Izuku thought about it. Because he looked at me and saw a vessel for his power, Izuku said. You looked at me and saw me. Gang Orca stopped. He adjusted his collar. He didn't say anything for a long time. Come on, Orca grunted finally, walking faster to hide the fact that he was touched. I'm buying you Katsudon. But then you're running 5 miles. 5 miles? Izuku groaned. But I just fought a sludge monster. 6 miles. 5 is good. 5 is great. They walked into the evening, the monster and the boy, leaving the symbol of peace behind. The next morning, Izuku woke up sore. His skin was stained slightly gray from the sludge, despite the scrubbing. He walked into the kitchen. His mother was cooking breakfast, humming happily. She hadn't seen the news yet. He sat down and opened the newspaper. Front page. All Might saves the day. Page 3. Gang Orca and sidekick intervene in hostage crisis. There was a photo. It was blurry. It showed Gang Orca standing tall, and next to him, a small figure in a middle school uniform, covered in slime, glaring at the camera with eyes that looked like glowing green sights. The caption read, The Abyssal Hero and the Leviathan? Izuku smiled. He cut the picture out and taped it to the cover of his notebook. Leviathan. He liked the sound of that. He packed his bag. The entrance exam was in 1 month. He was ready to sink the competition.